Hey guys, Chaps here, and it's time for the first developer stream recap of 2021. I've got quite a few comments throughout this one, so let's just go ahead and hop into it.
A slight change to the game on Tuesday. We rolled out the developers playlist tuning, which honestly people have had the ability to go and play with, and it's been in its current iteration in some form. We've made a few tweaks there for several months now. We've been gathering feedback. I will tell you, up until this point, the feedback has been near universal. The opportunity to play has been expansive. So, that being said, we're seeing the comments from people about saying, I love it, this is great, it's how I want to play.
To be clear here, when he says the feedback was almost universally positive, that's based off of the feedback from the beta tuning. I've seen a lot of unhappy people recently, as I'm sure he has as well, but from a beta tuning perspective, it was generally well received.
Big thing was we felt in the previous tuning there was a very, in general, a very kind of defined meta. People, we felt, were relying on a few maneuvers for success. And what we wanted to do was, as we were evolving the tuning, was to look at how do we go and add a level of smart, strategic gameplay into the world of Gears. And what we wanted to do was so that it wasn't just like if you got yourself into trouble, you could just do this thing and get out of it real quick. We wanted people to think about how they were going to attack, think about how they wanted to escape, think about how they were going to respond if they were attacked, and make it a little bit more thoughtful and purposeful in terms of what those fights look like. And by doing that, like, we recognize there are a variety of different players. While the game may feel significantly slower than for some, it's actually not that much slower. All we've done now is increase the depth of how you want to play.
So basically you have this balance between the two extremes. On one side you have a purely mental or strategic based game, and you have to be very smart about what you do, but your reaction time and physical skill don't really matter. On the other hand, you have a purely physical skill based game. You can be pretty reckless, but as long as you have the reaction times and physical control skills, you'll do better. Those are the two extremes, and no game really falls into one of those categories. Instead, basically every game out there falls as a balance somewhere in the middle, or I guess probably leaning towards one side or the other. TC feels that the game was leaning too much towards the physical skill side, and not enough towards the mental skill side. As the games have sped up over the years, it's naturally progressed in that direction. They clearly don't want to revert all the way back to the Gears 1 style, but this seems to be a step towards them wanting to bring it back to that mental skill portion that's more strategic.
This new tuning isn't anything like Gears 3, any of the following Gears, and neither is it like Gears 1 or 2. It's so damn slow. Or maybe it's the consoles like 1X and the lesser. From what I've been told, and I'm sure I'll be corrected if I get this wrong in the chat, this tuning actually isn't slower than 1 and 2. This tuning still has is faster than that. Now, compared to the compared to 4, it's a bit slower than that. This tuning is going to be, as I've been told, the last major tuning update that this game is going to have. We are really happy with the way this tuning is.
Oh, wow, that's kind of a big note to drop. I'm going to start off by saying that this basically confirms what many of us have been predicting. TC is transitioning Gears 5 into a hands-off type thing. They'll do minor tweaks here and there, and they'll add some new skins or maps, but as far as big changes go, it's over. I also want to emphasize one word that Dana said, and he said this is the last major tuning update. So yeah, I guess that means they can still look at making some minor adjustments based on feedback. Oh, and one thing I can't help but notice, I'm sure there's plenty of people at the Coalition who can give feedback about tuning, but we were told that Jim Bob was critical in helping shape the tuning. I can't help but notice that TC is now deciding that this is the last major tuning update, right after he left. I mean, the timing lines up pretty well with his contract ending and the game being so far into its lifespan. We were expecting it to be the last major tuning update soon anyways, but it's just a strange coincidence, and I figured I'd bring it up.
By the way, you guys had 2 months, and I think you should have played it, and you should have given feedback. That's a good point. Like, this thing had been in there for a long time, and we were asking for feedback. Like, full stop.
This is true, and that's why I find it kind of hard to sympathize with some of the people who don't like the tuning. That said, I'm sure a majority of players probably didn't play the beta playlist, or maybe people played it, hated it, and said, I don't like this, I'll move on. As kind of a side note on that, it would have been nice if there was an in-game poll for feedback or something for it. But more to the point of many people not playing it, I feel like it probably could have gone down like this. Step 1, introduce the beta playlist and get feedback. They did that, good job. Step 2, introduce it to the full game for 1 week and get feedback. And then step 3 is implement the final solution. Basically, instead of having the small sample size in the beta playlist and then just going with it, why not use that sample size as a justification to give it a trial run in the full game? In theory, that's sort of what they're doing, maybe. Like, if all this feedback is negative, maybe they'll revert it back next week. But I think that implementing it as a trial for the final tuning would have been a much better approach than, oh, here's the final tuning.
Bring 5v5s back. No, I don't think that's going to happen. We really like the way 4v4 plays in this environment. Are you guys bringing back the Thrashball game? I'd like to have a chance to earn those achievements again. I would say it's likely that you will see Gridiron in the future. Certainly maybe around a big game. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm assuming that means we're going to have a Gridiron event during the Super Bowl. But yeah, I gotta say I really miss having that as a permanent mode.
How long did it take to make the Wakatu and add to the game? I'm assuming you're talking... I'm going under the assumption of PvE here and not PvP. So in the PvE world, there's a whole bunch of stuff to go on to get it just for the campaign. So, sorry, not PvP. Campaign versus PvE. To get in the campaign, there's the character design. There's all sorts of things like that. Art... how it fits, the boss, everything. And then to get it into PvE, there was a lot of testing, a lot of balancing from that standpoint. One of the things that actually Michael Shannon told me was that initially they looked at it and it had a lot of health and not enough damage. And what it was doing is they found the fights were kind of really long and drawn out and boring. It wasn't strong enough to make you ever feel like you were under threat, but it had so much health that it didn't really feel like it just took a long time to kill. So they went and they tweaked it, so they actually brought down the health, but brought up the damage, which seems kind of counterintuitive. And that's that balance of you play with it and you kind of know when you get to that sweet spot of feeling like it feels like a good boss. The other part that was interesting was there was a lot of bugs, like clipping into the environment just because of flight paths and things like that. So there we go. Dana, can you talk about the direction TC intends to take Gears 5 in 2020? Operations, PvP, what to expect, and how will it differ from 2020? I think the biggest difference that you're going to see, and this is kind of flirting on the edge of few content, but I'm going to let you kind of get by this one with King, is you're going to see that we're not going to have major feature work coming to the extent of like what we did in 2020. Largely due to us overhauling a bunch of stuff in 2020. Once we had that summit, so for the changes that we did in Op 4 and the changes that we did in Op 5, fundamentally changed a whole bunch of stuff. And there is a few things coming, and I'll give more insight to where we are with that. But I think, we've heard a lot of your feedback about what's important to you guys. And you'll see more news coming about that as we move through. Did Gary Carmine die? Come on now. Future content. Can't talk about things negative space, that sort of stuff. Future content. I meant negative space. I just read future content above that. But we just saw him got knocked by an explosion. He could be alive somewhere.
Wait, seriously? He's pulling the negative space card here? How does he not know that Gary is confirmed dead? Come on, Dana. You work at the studio. I know that you can't know every single detail, but this seems kind of obvious. Oh, not to mention that we literally saw him get crushed by over a ton of steel falling from the sky. And no, this is not speculation on my part. It has been confirmed by the studio, multiple times actually, that he is in fact dead.
Are you guys planning on acknowledging the skin leaks, or are you just going to pretend it never happened? Well, they kind of acknowledged it. thanks to John's genius.
The monkey.
Obviously, it's like it's uh, I do want to talk a little bit about them because the content is there. Uh, it gets made and delivered in time, and content is being made on an ongoing basis. Um, an update happens. An update is what we use to put content inside of the game. And when we go and we do that, and then that content gets released between the beginning of an update and the end of that update. As we have content that rolls out, the accusations of drip feeding and all of that kind of stuff, the simple fact of the matter is this is just like any store, any game. It takes, like, if we were to go and give you everything on 1 week, literally you guys the week after would say, where's the new stuff? So I don't understand a little bit of the frustration around that. It's not it's not we're not out to thwart anyone. We're not out to kind of screw people. This is just the process of, we know that content is important. We know that you guys like content. So we put it out there and we're rolling it out on a week to week basis. And it's something that, like, and I'll give you an example of why we know this is the case. Because we go and we put content out, characters at the beginning of an operation. And we go when we put out 6 characters at the beginning of an operation. You guys are like, yay, new characters. We're so excited, so excited, so excited. And then after about 4 weeks, you guys are like, we would like more characters, please. And, maybe we'd be better off if we were to go and hold back those characters and roll them out every while. Would that feel better for you guys? Maybe, but then we would be accused of drip feeding the content. And this is the balance that we kind of go do. And we're not out trying to, like, make it feel like this horrible experience, but we're trying to also balance it out. So we go through and we're giving you guys content on a sustained basis.
Yeah, sure, they kind of acknowledged it, but to be honest, I feel that the way they handled it was abysmal. I put out a video condemning the way that the community handled it, as well as the way that the Coalition handled it. I really don't think that the Coalition handled leaks well. Also, I kind of want to bring attention to something he said here.
When we go and we do that, and then that content gets released between the beginning of an update and the end of that update.
I don't really think this is true. I've known about some of the leaks for quite a while now, like pre-Up 5. According to what he just said, stuff is added and it's released by the end of the update, which I assume by that he meant the end of the operation. I'm pretty sure there's stuff in there that still isn't released that's been in there since before Operation 5. Not only that, but by his statement it means that we should expect to see all of the leaked stuff by the end of Operation 5, right? This kind of goes back to the whole, there's more to it than what he just said. So again, I feel the Coalition should dedicate part of a blog post to it and actually address the issues honestly.
What's going on with the TCA program? We're actually going to add some new members very soon. From a partner standpoint, members can be added all the time. There is a bug with YouTube that we're working with them. So when you submit, if you're submitting from a YouTube account, that's a bug you're going to see, which we are working on. It's more on their end than our end. It's just something to do with how the API talks to each other. So that's part of it. Gears Glory is part of that. I think we're going to be looking at, Gears Glory's, hopefully for members. It's for people like that. Like, we want to go and celebrate the people that aren't just the partners, that are people that are Gears fans across the board. And that's kind of what we got going on there. For those of you that don't know, this is Ryan Foolz, a coach extraordinaire as I know you, from coached some highly successful teams. He's still rocking the envy behind him. We got a lot of questions around Gridiron specifically. So I was like, about what happened, because you guys did some play tests. We also made a bunch of changes around 4v4 for the competitive scene. A bunch of changes are happening in escalation. And I was like, you know what? It doesn't make any sense for me to go and talk to this. I should have Mr. Foolz himself.
One of the biggest underlying factors when it came to escalation was like the complexity of it. Like, it is very confusing. It is very hard to pick up. Gears 5 came out and escalation became even more complex, right? With things like the live system and everything else going on, right? The weapon trees, right? Escalation got even more complex to a mode that during Gears 4 was already considered very complex. So basically, escalation beta was introduced, right? TC introduced escalation beta, and that gave us an opportunity, obviously with the 4v4 change, to take a look at this game mode and start to look at how we can potentially simplify this to make it more player friendly, especially for new players, and then B, how to make it easier to watch, easier to digest, easier to explain, and how to just kind of sort of simplify the mode a little bit, because it was overly complex.
The other thing that we wanted to talk a little bit about was Gridiron. There was an appetite for a single elimination mode, a kind of a throwback to the days of yore of when you cut your teeth, when baby Ryan Foolz was around.
Yep.
So we put it out there. We did a few tweaks to it, and we did some feedback around that.
Yeah, so the short of it is that the mode itself, the way we were playing it, didn't quite feel ready, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. The reality of what we did when we did our gridiron testing, and if you're just tuning in, maybe you didn't get a chance to see what we basically did for our gridiron testing, which you mentioned, like I came from Gears 1, and I love this stuff. What we did to basically have gridiron play was have 2-minute rounds, and then we had the flag delay at 120 seconds, which is 2 minutes. So what that meant was the first 2 minutes of the round play out, and then the flag spawns up. And so as you guys know in gridiron, like if the time expires, what it basically does is it basically just automatically sets the round to overtime. So the flag comes in already in overtime. And so, and it's in a single tap. And because of the way that the mode works right now, it's you have to you don't have to click a button. You have to run over the flag to pick it up. And then the second you pick it up, because you're in overtime, it scores a point. And so that all of that combined with the idea that like what we were doing at that point, which by the way, I thought I did enjoy for what it was worth. We were basically taking a different mode, stripping it down in a very janky way, making it something that it wasn't. And so because of that, it didn't present well. It came across as kind of confusing. On top of that, we already had Gridiron introduced. There was a big tournaments around it, broadcasts around it, playing a completely different way. And so the presentation of the mode wasn't where we would have liked it to be.
And there you have it. Hopefully this new escalation won't be quite as confusing. Personally, I'd still prefer to see them get Gridiron working. I'm kinda doubtful though. Perhaps maybe in Gear 6? I hope that under the new leadership, the Coalition will be more open to actually developing a new competitive mode from the ground up for Gear 6, rather than doubling down on escalation, which was just a bad decision. But yeah, that does it for this week's recap. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. Thanks for watching everyone, and I will see you next week.